Hello friends and welcome. Today I have a video sharing 10 techniques when using dark cardstock, and we're going to do it in 10 minutes. We're making two cards, and on this first one we're using the Joyful Glimmer that is from Spellbinders. This came out I think in July, and it's a two-piece glimmer, and I am going to hot foil the first one in some matte gold. And this is our first technique, to use hot foil, or you could use heat embossing to add a bright metallic pop of color. Okay, you can see that didn't foil perfectly. I knew that would happen. That's the black cardstock that I'm using, but I like that it looks a little rustic and vintagey. This second plate layers on top, and you just kind of line it up. It's sort of intuitive to know where it goes. And I am going to create a hinge on the side so that I can use this aluminum glimmer foil from Spellbinders. Both of these are, I'll link everything below, okay? And then I'm gonna tape the whole thing down so it doesn't move and sort of smudge or end up not where I want it. I am not an expert glimmerer, but I love the effect of hot foil on dark cardstock. I don't know what it is. And I don't know why I don't love heat embossing quite as much. Maybe it's because I tend to end up with embossing powder in places where I don't want it. Anyway, I'm peeling this off and I about cried. I was having a day anyway. And part of my foil wasn't underneath the glimmer plate. So I grabbed, this is a Uniball pen. I got mine at Michael's, but I'll find them and link them somewhere. That silver pen matches that aluminum foil beautifully. Okay, so hot tip for when your foil doesn't work perfectly, but also that's another technique for your arsenal. You could use metallic pens to color in the holly and berries. So our next technique is to use bright matting layers. I use the Essential Modern Ovals to cut out the Joyful, and then the next size up to create a gold foil matte layer. I know that matte gold is really popular right now, and it would work here, but the shine you get from a mirror card is brighter. It catches the eye more and creates more contrast against that dark cardstock. If I wasn't going to use gold, I probably would pull like a bright red or a bright pink that would go along with the berries on my holly, because that bold color also would create that same contrast and pop. Our next technique is to use metallic watercolors. These are from Kuretake. I have the white one is the gem colors and the brown one is the pearl colors. And I just added some water with like an eyedropper, and then I let that water sit for a minute. I want those to get nice and sort of thick and creamy. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to use this pink on all of those holly berries. On this set, these little spots are so small. You do not need any painting skill to do this. But again, you could use like a metallic pen too if you wanted. I like that the foil is going to resist the watercolor a little bit, not all the way. These are opaque. Okay, and that's why it creates that great contrast and pop against your dark cardstock. So I'm trying on these holly leaves not to completely cover the center line that foiled. On one or two of them, I do it anyway because there was just too much paint. Okay, but if I hadn't gone so heavy-handed with the paint, it wouldn't have been a problem. If you heat emboss, it creates a little bit of a well in addition. And so it resists the paint a little bit more, or a little bit better. I brought in the pearl colors because I wanted a second green. There are two shapes of leaves on here. I think they're all holly leaves. Maybe those are supposed to be mistletoe. I don't know, you guys. I don't know anything about plants or the outdoors. I make cards because it's inside. Okay, so I'm going through and I'm filling in the rest of those leaves with my paint. I want to point out that I'm using black cardstock, but I also love a dark navy cardstock, a dark plum cardstock, like a really dark teal. All of those would also work beautifully here. So I'm going to set that aside to dry. Then I'm going to take an A2 panel of that same black cardstock, rub it with a baby wipe, and run it through this Holly and Foliage embossing folder from Spellbinders. Look at it next to the white one. I don't know what magic this is, but dry embossing stands out more on dark cardstock than it does on light cardstock. Something about the way the light hits it and the way the shadows are created. If you have not tried your 3D embossing folders with dark cardstock, please do. I am going to add this to a black card base. That's my next technique. Technique, now we're sort of overlapping. When I make cards, I typically add a panel to a white card base, but when everything is so dark, I feel like that white card base is a distraction, okay? Then my next tip is similarly to add dark foam tape. This one is from iCrafter from Decofoil, and it's great. Do I use it as much as my white foam tape? No, but sometimes it matters. I know that most people are not inspecting your card, but when I turn a card and there's like a flash of white on the side and the rest of it is this dark, it's distracting to me. So I think it's worth it. I have several kinds of black foam tape and I'll link them all below because they work better for different occasions, but consider it, check it out. My next tip, we're gonna start a new card. This is a piece of dark navy cardstock. And the technique is to make it darker, okay? I know it feels dark already, but you get this moodiness when you add a little ink around the edges. I just took some black soot distress ink around the edges, and then I'm gonna emboss this. This is the July 2023 3D embossing folder of the month. I'll link it below. It is still available, but I will also link the vintage Ornaments 3D embossing folder, which is very similar and probably a little cheaper since it wasn't a club. Then once I run that through, I want to highlight some of those places. And so our next technique is to use Pigment Ink on an embossing folder, okay? This is Hero Art's Unicorn White Pigment Ink, and I pointed at the back, it says number 2. I have several of these pads, and this one is a little bit dry. If you use a really juicy ink pad, it's more likely to get into those low places, the cracks, and I don't want that. I want it to sit just at the very highest points of it. And then I took my microfiber cloth and I just kind of buffed it out. I wanted to soften that just a little bit. I also heat set it because it is pigment ink and I don't want it to smear later. I'm adding that onto, again, a dark card base, and I wanted to add a sentiment that would really pop, okay? So our next technique is to add a bright sentiment, which you can do in a bunch of ways, but here I'm gonna do it with red cardstock. Just like with our matting layers earlier, the goal here is to create contrast, to create a bright pop of color. If I was going to create a really large sentiment, I would still go for something bright. Like maybe I die cut the words Merry Christmas. I don't want to die cut that out of black or blue or brown, right? It's going to get kind of lost. I want that pop of color, but I want it to have the same moody feel as the background. So this is Hero Art's Red Royal. It's their mid red ink, and I'm coming in just on the sides, and I'm going to bring in the tiniest little bit of black soot as well, and it makes it feel like that strip of red has shine to it, like the whole thing is shining, right? And the center of it is where the light is hitting the brightest. I'm also adding a little bit of gold mirror cardstock behind it for an extra pop. That shine is always going to catch your eye, especially against some dark cardstock. Then I'm just going to use my liquid glue. I grabbed my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive because the grab is a little faster and there's so much dimension on there. But I could also have used my black thin foam squares from Spellbinders. That also would have worked really well. That finishes up both our cards and gives us 10 techniques in 10 minutes. Let me know in the comments below which card you like the best. I've also got a couple bonus cards where I use these techniques and several more. If you would like to see more techniques for dark cardstock, or just more technique videos in general, let me know in the comments below. I had a lot of fun making this. I will also link to my blog post that has all of the techniques for you, along with the supplies for the cards we made today and those bonus cards. That release from Spellbinders was absolutely incredible. You should check it out. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.